My name is Elena. I'm a registered dietitian and I have specialties in both sports nutrition and eating disorders. Now, I don't tell you that because I'm trying to flex. I tell you that because in both of those lines of work, I have done a lot of work with metabolism. I have quite literally used a machine called an indirect calorimeter that measures your resting metabolic rate. Anytime I talk about the fact that I have worked with metabolism, I get a couple of questions. The first one being, what is that? What is that machine and what does it test? Which I'll talk about in a second. The second one being, how do I get it done? And the third one being, okay, what do I do with that information? A metabolic test is a breathing test. So typically what happens is you either wear a mask on your face like this or sit under a bubble and you breathe. And usually the test takes about 20 to 30 minutes. You often have to go into the test fasted, having not done any exercise, because they really want to get a good picture of how many calories your body's burning to do absolutely nothing, right? So you sit under there and it's going to measure your carbon dioxide out versus oxygen in, and that's why it's called indirect calorimetry, because based on that, it gives you a number called a respiratory quotient. Now that respiratory quotient, or RQ, can be closer to 0.7, meaning that your body is burning more fat, or closer to 1, meaning that your body is burning more carbohydrates. Now that's just a piece of this whole puzzle, but that's an important number. And then of course, when you come out of the test, it's going to give you a number more like, let's say, 1400 or 1552 or something like that, that's going to be your RMR, or resting metabolic rate. Now, I do want to clarify one thing. You're going to hear RMR, which is resting metabolic rate, and BMR, which is basal metabolic rate. And technically, those two things are a little bit different, but for the purposes of what we're talking about, we're going to use those two terms interchangeably because most people refer to them in the same way. Now, an indirect calorimeter, or the metabolic testing that we do, is testing RMR, which is resting metabolic rate. You get that number, and let's say, again, your resting metabolic rate after doing that breathing test comes out to being 1552, 1,552 calories. A lot of people think, okay, cool, so I burn 1,500 calories roughly, and so I'm just gonna subtract from that number and that's how I'll lose fat. No, because resting metabolic rate is how many calories your body burns to do absolutely nothing. Meaning 1,552 calories is how many calories you burn to just lay there. It would be how many calories your body would need if you were bedridden. To jump to answer question 3 from my initial intro, 1552 is how many calories your body's burning at rest. And so a lot of people say, what do I do with that number? So we take the 1552, again, completely at rest. I cannot stress that enough. You do not want to subtract from that number, because then you're not giving your body its basic needs to just let your organs function the way that they need to. So what we do with that number is we take that resting metabolic rate number, the 1552, we add for the just getting up and moving around. We call that NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. This would be just things like getting up and walking to the bathroom, or going to your car, or walking into work, or any of the day-to-day things that you do. And that number can actually be quite a bit higher than people think. So it would be realistic, just for the purposes of this experience, just for the purposes of this topic, to add about 500 calories to your day. And honestly, a lot of people, it's a lot higher than that. Some people wear Apple Watches, will see that their activity burned is more like 850 in a day, even when they haven't done intentional exercise. So we take that 500, right? So we're gonna take 1552, let's say it's 500, we're gonna add those two things together. Then just your resting metabolic rate, and that NEAT is going to be 2,052 calories in a day that your body needs. Now, if you're doing no exercise whatsoever, that would be your total daily energy expenditure. So if you're doing no exercise, again, 2,052 would be the number of calories your body needs in total. From there, you can subtract a little bit if you're trying to lose fat. Now, the key here is that doesn't have to be 500 calories. That's a thing that's got thrown out there. It doesn't have to be 500 calories. What's more realistic is actually more like 200 to 300 calories. So if we then subtract that, it's gonna bring you back down to about 1,800 calories, give or take, and that would be a calorie deficit. Now, again, that's the scenario assuming you did no exercise whatsoever. Let's go back to that scenario, but say you did do exercise. So again, we have the 1552 resting metabolic rate. We add the 500 for your activities of daily living, and then we also add for exercise. Now, let's say your exercise, you burn 300 calories. Of course, then that brings our total daily energy expenditure to 2,352. And then same thing, if you were trying to lose a little bit of fat, subtract about 200 to 300 calories from there, which brings us back down to about 2,000 to 2,100 calories. That 2,000 to 2,100 calories would be a calorie deficit, but that's how you want to interpret those numbers if you get metabolic testing done. Of course, that information is super helpful. So then a lot of people are like, well, how do I get this testing done? You can Google it. I know that sounds funny, but really just look up resting metabolic rate testing in your area, RMR testing, or indirect calorimetry. Now, a lot of times gyms offer it, sometimes universities, sometimes there's just individual clinics that's primarily what they do. I can't speak to cost because it's always different, but I would say you're gonna pay anywhere from like 50 to 300 bucks for it. The key here is it has to be a breathing test. Remember, like I said in the beginning, it should be a breathing test where you're laying down completely at rest, either with a bubble over your head or a mask over your face. That is how you test resting metabolic rate. Anything else, like if you stand on a machine and it does calipers or anything else, is going to be an estimate. When you get a machine done where you stand on it or whatever and they're just measuring your body fat and an RMR comes up from that, that's based on an estimation based on the muscle mass you have in your body. So it's not as accurate as getting a breathing test done. So I cannot stress that enough. It has to be a breathing test. So look in your area for exactly that. Look to see if you can find a resting metabolic rate test. I'm gonna say it for the 15th time, has to be a breathing test. And then see if you can find a dietitian in your area to interpret those results. Of course, you can come see me. I work throughout the country doing nutrition coaching, so you can bring those results to me. The link will be in the comments. But if not, look for a dietitian that's comfortable in analyzing these results. The biggest thing that would be a red flag is if someone, again, let's say takes your resting metabolic rate at 1552 and tells you to subtract from that and then tells you to eat 1,000 calories or something like that. That would be how you know, whoa, maybe that person isn't interpreting these results correctly. A little bit about metabolic testing and how it's used. It can be a super important tool for any of your nutrition goals, whether or not that's just gaining weight, maintaining weight, losing weight. Maybe it has nothing to do with weight at all. Maybe you just want to know more about your body. Maybe you're an athlete and you want to know how to best fuel your body. Maybe you want to try to build some muscle mass or increase performance in one way or another. Maybe you're recovering from an eating disorder. This information can be helpful for everybody because it gives us more knowledge about what's going on internally in our bodies. If you want to learn more about metabolism, please leave some questions in the comment section. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and also go find me on my website, Eford Nutrition, if you need help, and I'm happy to see if we can work together.